This is the unfiltered truth about entrepreneurship. Raw, no BS, no sugarcoating. Welcome to Entrepreneur Intel. I'm your host, Wes Matthews. Each episode, we'll learn from experienced founders and uncover the top 5% learnings that led to their success in all things personal, family, and business. This show is sponsored by Stealth Consulting, delivering clear marketing strategies, ROI, and no surprises. So welcome, an energetic entrepreneur, a good friend of mine, Jennifer Moss, a talented founder whose experience as a parent led her to start her own business. She served on the board for the Detroit EO chapter, has been on the EO for many, many years, and she's the owner of IXL Learning Center. Jen, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. Fun.
Now, question, let everybody know a little bit about IXL before we get started. What is IXL today?
Okay. So currently IXL is a childcare center and we're in the Metro Detroit area. There's 9 locations. We're opening up our latest location this upcoming January 2nd, 2024. There's roughly 350 employees. I have managing partners that help me with all the locations. I don't know exactly how many children we serve, but probably a couple thousand in the area. And we've been in business for about 20 years.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. So the show is called Entrepreneur Intel. What I love meeting and talking to entrepreneurs and everybody listening is to get right to the details of, give intel, right? I mean, you have such a great story in terms of, starting as an entrepreneur to where everything's at today. But I mean, kind of going back, I'd love to hear, and for the listeners, how'd you get started, right? I mean, my mom used to tell me, go to college and get that good job, that 9 to 5, that was kind of pushed on me. I went the unconventional route to become an entrepreneur, and I'm really fascinated with everybody's reasoning as to why. So, why did you decide to take on, this entrepreneurial journey?
Okay, so let me just go back to some of the messaging that I had too. It was, you go to college, you work hard, and you work for somebody. But I also paid attention to the people that are around me that were successful and had businesses and things like that. And what I noticed is that they were willing to do things that other people weren't willing to do to get to where they wanted to go, whether that's working on the weekends, evening, having a side hustle. And so me watching that, I knew in order to have the lifestyle, or even including not just financial, but the freedom and being able to make my own choices, I knew that I was going to need to be able to do something different. But to be honest, I thought I was going to be a stay-at-home mom. So I did go to college. My degree was in business. It was not in education. I married my husband and we thought, okay, I'll be a stay-at-home mom, but that wasn't for me, which then led me to doing in-home childcare at my house. And
Okay.
that's kind of where it started. My friend in the neighborhood was doing it. And I was like, well, I can do this too. And so I was doing that. And then my cousin's husband was like, hey, there's this childcare center for sale. And then that's kind of how it started. So it was like the next natural step, which I think is the very first lesson in becoming an entrepreneur. It has to be something that you're familiar with, and it becomes the next natural step for you to take. So I was doing in-home childcare. It was the next natural step then for me to take it outside of my home and have a facility. And it was only a small 4-room facility when I started.
So were your parents entrepreneurs? You saw, kind of had ideas, but was that your upbringing? Did you see your parents have their own businesses or?
So interestingly, my dad did have a day-to-day 9 to 5 job. He was a mechanical engineer and he worked for Michigan Bell. He worked that from the time he graduated till he retired, but he did have a side hustle. He had Discount Pop and Beer was the name of his business, and it was a side hustle. He had two locations, and my mom would go and take inventory and stuff like that. But he would do that on the weekends or evenings, and he owned the real estate, which I watched that, and that was extremely important for me to see. So yeah, I guess in a way he was an entrepreneur as well, but he also kept his day job through that whole period of time.
So thinking back, you said 20 years, right? So go back in the mindset of Jen 20 years ago, neighbor says, hey, you're doing this out of your basement, so to speak. There's this little center for sale, right? What, how did you formulate that or take on that initiative? I always find it fascinating where how did you get that desire to say, yeah, I actually can see something outside of my home, or, I just want to take care of my kids, maybe a couple of the neighbor kids. Like, what really pushed you over the edge?
Okay, so for me, being a stay-at-home mom, it is the hardest job on the planet, to be honest, because you don't ever
I
get to
agree.
leave it. You're doing it day in and day out, and I felt like I needed to do something more. And so when this opportunity came up, now first of all, it takes a long time for something to happen. So even though this opportunity came up, it took over a year for me to actually buy the center because
Oh,
the
wow.
deal kept going away. It would be like, oh, someone else is going to offer us more money. And so I just had to sit tight and wait patiently. And the deal kept coming back to me. And so nothing happens overnight, which I think sometimes a lot of entrepreneurs think that like, okay, I'm going to do this. And then, 2 months from now, I'm going to be successful. Well, I didn't even get in the game till a year after I had decided to get in the game because just the way that it went down. And I went in there being like, I don't care what it takes, I'm going to succeed. And I don't even care if I make money. I know I'm going to succeed because I was that driven and that determined to. It sounds cheesy, but I needed to realize another aspect of myself. I'd been, stay-at-home mom, you do all those things, laundry, whatever else. I needed to prove to myself that I could do something else because I had kids really early. I did some day trading, I did some a retirement, but I didn't really have a career, and I was determined and I was going to do something. So there 3 accountants looked at the books and said, "Don't do this, you're gonna lose money." My parents were like, "Please don't do this." They were so scared for me to the debt was more than what our mortgage was on our house at the time.
Oh, wow.
And so but I just
And that's probably scary then, right? I mean, you're 20 years ago. Like, I don't know what the situation was at
oh,
home. Like, if
we
husband was working or like, it's a huge risk, right?
oh, yeah, like yeah, he made a living, but, we were young. So, we had 2 young kids and, yeah, we didn't have really any money to speak of. So, it was very scary. But you know what? There's this thing. It's like I just knew it. I was just determined. It was again, everyone except my husband told me don't do it. And
So he was supportive. He's like, "Go
oh
for it.
yeah, for
Let's
right from
go."
he didn't doubt it for 1 second. And I give him a lot of credit because it was I mean, again, like I said, the loan that we were taking out to buy this business was more than our mortgage was at the time.
Wow.
So it was pretty scary. And you
That's
don't
gotta
make
feel
money
good. He
for
believed in you.
years.
Yeah.
You don't make money
Yeah.
for years too. At least a couple years.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Like, in my journey, my wife was, like, my biggest cheerleader, which my wife well, obviously, and
Love her.
everybody else around me was like, "You're stupid," or
Mhm.
like, "You should just go down this route," and like, "Everybody else is doing this, what's gonna make you different?" Like, all this noise, so it's always fascinating to me because I think, a lot of people, especially now, like, I have 5 kids and I watch, like, their how they look at the world, and it's the instant gratification of, like, if I can't get it now, and I think a lot of people take for granted, like an entrepreneur, like, it is time, like, so, and what's interesting to me about, like, your business, because to me, it's kinda like, from my perspective, and I'd love to get your clarification, like, you've built such a huge business, and to me, it's kinda turned into, like, real estate and, like, all these other things, and, like, a byproduct is, oh, yeah, like, we watch kids and there's a preschool or whatever the terminology is, but it's fascinating to me, so, like, talk a little bit about it's like you had this idea, kids are in your home, and then you go off to this venture. So like you close on that deal, things start to happen. Like what happens then, right? Because I'm assuming it wasn't all
Oh,
roses
you
and
get your
and things
ass
came out of the
kicked.
woodwork.
You get your ass kicked because you don't know how to be a leader yet. So you make all the leadership mistakes, all of the leadership mistakes. So reading every leadership book really ends up helping, but you kind of have to go through it yourself and,
Yeah,
have people quit on you, accidentally betray people's confidences because you're trying to solve a problem and this person told you about that person and you make all the mistakes, right? You piss off parents because you don't know how to be diplomatic yet. Like you just you know what I mean? I made all the mistakes for sure. And I would stay up at night, like sick to my stomach, replaying conversations. The thing I think that differentiates a leader and of course everyone likes to think they're a good leader. I think I'm a good leader to a point. I'm sure there's a lot of things that I can work on. Is you have to be able to be self-reflective and go, "Ooh, I did that wrong. I said those things," and really learn from your mistakes. And it doesn't you can't have the idea that you're bad or you're wrong. You just have to be like, "Oh, I know better. I can do better." and being able to be flexible and move and to change what your thinking is on the fly is very is very important to leadership. You can't grow and improve if you aren't willing to reflect back. But man, did I get my
No,
ass
that's
handed
great.
to
That
me.
that that that's really good advice. I think a lot of leaders at some point realize that, they're forced to realize that, or they haven't experienced that yet. So for you in those situations, like, did you have like, was your husband your partner? Did you bring in a partner? Like, who was, like, your rock throughout this whole process, throughout that initial stage of your journey?
I mean, I certainly came home and like vented things to my husband, but he wasn't in an entrepreneurial or he wasn't the leader at his company. So it really,
He worked for a
yeah,
company,
he
so it was
worked
very,
for a
very
company. He
different?
had
Yeah.
the stable job, all the things. I didn't really have that many people until EO came around, and that was like 4 or 5 years into the journey, and then that was exponential for sure. But initially, you just go home and kind of, regroup and read books. I reading books, you can read about what experience you're going through without being judgmental because there's no one there going, "You did that wrong." You just go, "Ooh." You read yourself in the book and you go, "Yeah, I did that. Oh, this person handled it this way.
Yeah.
Okay." So reading books, I feel like for me was significant.
So you mentioned something. So for the listeners, Jen mentioned EO, which stands for Entrepreneur Organization. That's actually where Jen and I met. And EO is a group of like entrepreneurs, like founders that are grossing over $1 million of revenue. You have to be the founder, be part of the group. So EO Detroit today, I think, has about 120, 130 members, and it's a great organization for entrepreneurs because it's like-minded, your tribe of people that you can learn and do a lot of experience shares with. So it's cool in this journey to have other people that are, going through the same things, even though we might be in different industries. It allows us to like bounce questions or, some of the stuff that Jen was alluding to and some of the challenge she was facing. But, to me, it's fascinating that, you kind of went on a limb, started this thing, right? And then all of a sudden, like you look back and you have not, you said nine
Mhm.
centers. So at some point you're like, this one's to a point, like, was it all buttoned up and all rosy and you're like, "Let's go on to number 2," or, like, what was that transition
You
like or that next leap?
you gather a team, and
Okay.
I picked a freaking phenomenal team. If that's the one thing that I can take credit for, is I have a phenomenal team. The rest is all them. And one of the things that you learn when being a entrepreneur or leader is you don't have all the skill sets, and that is okay. And other people can fill in your gaps, and that's okay. So, uh, N knowing when to bring on your team, knowing how to set them free to do what they do best, knowing when to back off, like, all of those things, is a learning curve, but that is what you have to be able to hand off your roles in order for you to grow your company. It's the old entrepreneur saying you have to work on your business, not in your business.
Yeah. That's amazing, and, like, I have a question around that, like, did you, like, go to the Observer, the local? Because 'cause I'm rewinding 20 years ago, so I'm thinking, like, where technology is, like, were these close friends and family, referrals? Did you go to the open market? Like, how did you find or attract these leaders that were able to help you get to the next level in your business?
So they were actually working for me, and,
Okay.
you can tell leaders, they're sometimes they're just natural born leaders. So the people who are open-minded, who are willing to help, that stay late, that are there for you, and that kinda get it, and then I went to them and I was like, "Hey, I kinda wanna do another one of these. Do you wanna go on this journey with me?" And they were like, "Yes." And then a lot of trust has to happen because that takes time. That took that took a good, couple years to get to the next destination and the destination after that. So it takes a lot of trust and letting go of your role so that you can grow other roles.
So I'm assuming that as you scaled your businesses, like you have 9, so you kind of find that individual and now they're in charge of that location, right? So like fast forward today quickly and we'll kind of toggle back and forth, but like do you visit your locations like every week? Is it just you meet with those leaders of each location? Like what's your cadence? Like what's your rhythm in terms of, I mean, you said 350 employees, 9 locations, like that's a lot. Like how do you go from, you know, Jen Moss in her house, couple kids to now this huge, massive company. Like, how do you manage that?
Again, I'm going to go back to the team. So even though there's individual managing partners at each location, the very first two people that I engaged to do this journey with me, fortunately, were phenomenal, and they grew as well as I grew, like our capabilities, and they actually do a lot of the day to day, and they're really more the interface. Like I interact all the time with the individual, um, the directors and the assistant directors and the managing partners, but they really handle a lot of the day to day. And my focus now more is on facilities. So I'm securing the next location, doing the renovation, so that my role it has shifted in that. So it's your team. It's just your team.
So you take like a natural progression,
Hmm.
right? Like I imagine like you were all hands on deck,
Hmm.
like sleepless nights building the company,
Hmm.
but now you've sort of transitioned and elevated as the company's grown and now you have different problems, right?
Hmm.
I look at like little kids, little problems, big kid, big problems. So like you're on the real estate side. Um, is that more fun to you? Like, do you miss the grassroots of the business now, or are you like, no, I'm good. I'm on to the next build and
It's hard because I really love both things. Like when I was the first director at Hamburg, which was the small location at, with the four centers, I think no one can do this better than me. Like I love these families. I loved the teachers, like, and then you realize that there are people that actually can do your job better than you're doing it. But it was really hard to let go. So it was it I love that aspect. I miss that aspect, but I also love what I'm doing right now. So I absolutely love what I'm doing right now. So we're all kind of in the wheelhouses that we're good at.
so I'm 42, but if I rewind back to like when I was a kid and like daycare, I didn't go to daycare, but if I did, I imagine my mom just like kicking me out of the car and like driving away and like things were different. Fast forward to today, like I look at that and like parents and like what's going on in the world and like how has that evolved? Or like you're essentially taking care of the most prized possession, right? And you're dealing with parents like I can't even fathom. I'm like the different levels of people and like how do you like from where you started to now? Like, are there any like nuggets in that or things you've learned? I mean, because for me, it's like you've probably had some of the most challenging conversations or like little Johnny falls or so much could happen. Like, how did you start and where did that evolve?
Gosh, it's so interesting. It's process and procedure and communication. So, as you grow and as you build, you have to have processes and procedures. And as technology has gotten better and we've gotten on board with it, we're able to manage things way better with communication and how we care for the children. So we have apps that are like, it's like a face app. So like you're coming in from mom's inside and you like check, yep, I've got this child, I've got, because sometimes there's two classrooms out at the same time in the playground. So you have to like the teachers have to gather their kids. So now we have apps and tools to be able to manage that. And I mean, kids do get hurt. It's what they do. It's what happens. Like they're going to get hurt at home. They're going to get hurt at here. But if you are upfront, always direct and honest, and you have good communication and you follow process and procedure, it usually helps and keeps things consistent and as safe as possible as well.
Yeah, it's really good advice because I think any entrepreneur, right? Like a lot of them are visionaries. They don't spend a lot of time in process and procedure. And I could see in your business and experience like how important that is. I think oftentimes, and you brought up a good point about just a lot of entrepreneurs are visionaries, and you might need to find somebody who's better than you to actually implement these processes and procedures and take your ideas and do it. And I think that's some really good advice you gave about just hire smarter people that can fill the void on your weakness. Cause like personally myself, like I could never be in charge of a daycare. Like my processes and procedures are terrible. But taking it to the next level of like the real estate and the stuff you're working on now, like you just talk a little bit about your center that just opened or it's opening relatively soon. Like walk everybody quickly through that process. Like I remember talking to you and how excited you're like, I found the location, I'm doing this, and then all of a sudden I drove by, I'm like, holy shit, like it's here. Like you made that a reality. Like talk a little bit like that's really fascinating for me. I think the listeners would love to hear just that vision to reality and how you just go for it.
Well, so I think there's a couple things here to answer your question and to add something to it. Sometimes you have to make your luck. And so, like, yes, I've used real estate brokers and they're always involved, but I do a lot of driving around and finding my own stuff. because if you wait for it to come to you, it might not ever come to you. And then once it's like, the universe brings it to you, right? Like you're driving around and so, especially the location that I just opened up, I drive by there because I live close to this one and I'm like, I need to be on this corner. I need to be here.
Thanks.
And I didn't even know that building existed. And then all of a sudden it just popped up. But that one I got through a broker, a very good broker friend of ours, which I very much appreciate. But it's like you almost like conjure it. I feel like it might sound silly, but it is. I feel like what it is. And you've got to be driving around and you always have to be looking at opportunity. And not only that, I get excited for other people's opportunity when I'm like, oh, cool, that business opened up. I feel like the energy that you put out comes back. So if you're excited for other people's opportunities and you're excited for other people doing well, it like you start to see opportunity all around you instead of problems. So, but you have to make it yourself. You've got to drive
No,
around.
that's awesome, and, like, how do you feel about so, like, you see that area, like, you drive by there, you see that, I see a golf course, right? Like, we all see things a little bit differently, but, like, how do you then like, do you worry about filling that place? I mean, or is it like, I put a daycare here and, like, your name carries the weight and there's just enough houses? Like, how do you approach that? Because obviously you're driving around, but a lot of other demographics, I'm sure, come into play in terms of how many homes are there, and,
Okay, so
I mean, they're building on
I
every
don't
corner.
do any of that kind of stuff where you're looking at logistics. It's gut instinct, I feel.
Yeah.
Especially, I don't know if I were to open one up in a different state. I don't know if I would because I don't know if I would be able to know better, but I'm familiar with this area. So I know where there's good areas. I know where people travel, but yes, you're definitely afraid of like, is it going to fill up? When we opened up the Northville location, we had one kid for like 6 months because
Wow.
we hadn't built up our name yet around here. So it was like everyone would come in and be like, well, I don't want my kid to be the only one in here. I'm like, well, someone has to decide, someone has to come here. So I always looked at it as what your kid's getting one-on-one care, but they wanted their child to be playing with other children. So that one took a while. So you have to be prepared for whatever it is. And I truly believe if you put your heart and soul into it and you provide the best that you can provide, the business comes.
That's awesome. So you're at 9 today. Is it open yet, or is it opening in, like, a couple weeks?
That last one is opening in a couple weeks, and that's my first new build. I built it from the ground up.
That's a from the ground up.
Yeah, all the other
Now
buildings were
is that, like, your
retrofit.
new baby now? Like, do you love that? Like, is that something you wanna keep pursuing now, like, fresh new construction, or
Not really, because it's really expensive to do it that way. It really is. It probably added another 40% to, like, if I just
wow,
retrofitted a building. In the location that I'm putting it in New Hudson, there isn't other buildings there, so there was not an opportunity, and there that area is just exploding. So, do I love it because I got to design it exactly how I wanted to for the most part? Yeah, that part was fun. Having somebody else build it because normally I kinda GC my own projects. That was fantastic, but from a financial perspective, it's a lot more expensive that I'd rather retrofit. The common sense for me would be to retrofit a building.
and the real estate side's fascinating for me from you. Does it all go back to that watching your dad and that, like, back in the day? Like, to me, you always get really excited about real estate,
I love
and
real estate now, but you wanna know why I did real estate is because my very first landlord, which, of course, they're building my building now, who I love, but I didn't get to control what the outside looked like, how it was taken care of, and I wanted control of the area that my business was in. So, to me, it was more about control. And then, of course, I had my dad being like, "Hey, owning the building's a great thing, blah, blah, blah." So you've got a couple things going on. I wanted to control what it looked like. I also put a lot of infrastructure in there, so I can't have a landlord in 10 years being like, "Yeah, sorry, we're not gonna renew." So I
yep.
wanted to take some of the risk factors out of it, and opened a year or 2 before the recession hit. So everything that I do, I'm trying to recession proof myself. And so me owning the real estate, paying down the debt, like making sure that I can stay open through a recession. And so that if we end up with half the kids because, what happened in 2008, people moved out of state, I can still stay open. So everything for me has like an end goal in mind, and that is to control what I'm doing, control your destiny really, and then also recession proof myself.
Did you learn that along the way? Like, the whole concept of, like, the landlord saying, "Hey, sorry, we're leasing this to somebody else." Like, were you in a situation like that, or did you just inherently from the get-go, "No, like, I wanna be able to control this. I foresee this as being a potential problem?"
Yeah, because
Or did you actually get caught into a
no, I
situation
did,
where,
thank
like
goodness I didn't. I got caught in a situation where they weren't maintaining the exterior how I would like them to, and then you start putting money into your own building and you're like, "Wait a minute, I'm putting money into someone else's building." So you start to think of those things and you're only signing like a 5 or 10-year lease, and then I'm like, "Well, what happens
Yep.
after this?" So, you gotta think short term and long term at the same time.
So, the ninth location's going live in a couple weeks. Like, what's next? Are you looking to go to, like, 20 locations, or, like, where does this stop? Or, when
Yes. Yeah, so a lot of people, like, always have, like, goals, right? And they're like, "Oh, and yeah, I have a goal in mind, like, I've always thought, "Okay, well, maybe I'll do 12," like, but that is, like, an arbitrary goal for me. I always am open to opportunity. So, if something happens, like, I'm looking, I have my eyes open, some of the like, one of my locations, South Lyon, a previous employee went there and didn't like how it was run, and she was like, "My old boss needs to buy this from you." So you never know where opportunity is gonna show up. So I'm always open to opportunity. I love hearing, you know, any new anyone's opportunity to me is fun. I think business and opportunity is super fun. So I don't know, wherever
Well, I
the
think what I
world
hear from
takes
you
it.
is, like, you put so much good out there with, like, no expectation coming back, and then these opportunities start to present themselves. But I think the reality is it kinda goes back to the character and the person you are and how you show up and how you do business. I mean, to me, it's pretty amazing. Like, you have the ultimate trust with parents. I mean, I have 5 kids. I don't really trust a lot of people. Like, to be able to drop a child off like that's a huge responsibility. Like, I don't know what's bigger than that.
So I agree with that. I mean, I have kids, like, I brought my kids to my own center, and the thing, one of our, like, guiding tenets is always to go above and beyond. You have to build the relationship with the parents, and it takes a long time, and it takes communication. It takes, like, their child fell down, they have a small bump, so you call them to let them know that you're paying attention to their child. Like, you have to really build rapport, and then you have to teach that to the people who come after you, right? And then they have to see the value in that. So there there's no doubt about it. It's trying to exceed people's expectations. So every decision we make, we're trying to always look for what's best for the children, then the teachers, and then the families. If you take care of the children and the teachers, the families should take care of themselves, because that's where the crux of it is. So we always make decisions with
Interesting.
that in mind.
So as a crazy successful entrepreneur, you mentioned you have kids. Like, do the kids play a role into the future of IXL, or, like, rewind back from when they're little till now, right? I think it's different being an entrepreneurial parent, right? And your kids are watching you, and a lot of different things are happening. And sometimes the kids come into the business, sometimes they go in a different path. Like, are your kids interested in the business at all? Or are they gonna be entrepreneurs? Or
So I think at least one for sure will be an entrepreneur. I don't know. Like, I hope they get to pick whatever pathway they go. Have we talked about leadership growing up? Oh my God, they could probably recite the lectures that I have given them just in me working on my own stuff and talking about it out loud. Like, they have learned a lot. But one of the things that makes IXL a little bit different is that in order for me to grow, like I said at the beginning, I thought I was so good at it, and that no one could do it better. And I loved it so much. And I'm like, how do I have someone else love it as much as I love this? And so then I came up with a managing partner idea, like, you just kind of you sit there in the universe, or God gives you, insight. And so all of the centers have an exit strategy already. And so they're run by a managing partner that shares in whatever profits they are, and then it is going to be theirs to buy the business and the building when the loans and debt paid off and things like that. So that they love it as much as I love it, and that to me, when you start to become successful, you have to bring other people with you, and so that's what I did, and it's you have other people cheering for your company as much as you're cheering for your company, and it's really hard to get people that bought in unless they have a financial incentive. So um I'm sure over the years I've made a lot less money, but I don't care, because I'm loving the journey from here to there, because I'm working with so many amazing, wonderful people that care as much as I do.
well, it's great too. The advice I hear in the nugget is, when people have a little skin in the game, it's a little bit different,
It's
right?
so
And I think
much
that
different.
your path of like how you architected your business is fascinating to me because it's created this pathway for you to kind of do what you love, but allow for the right operators to have skin in the game and run it successfully and have the right people. So it's fascinating from the start. So like talk about like what's holding your attention now. So like you have this grand opening, and it's like, are you just kind of like go about life and see if another corner appears itself? Like, do you see yourself staying with IXL and the real estate there, or are you also looking to get involved in other types of real estate and other types of deals? I mean, a lot of our listeners are entrepreneurs; they're into a lot of things, and they might want your expertise on real estate. Like, it's fascinating that you've been able to do all this real estate, and but like, is it all IXL, or are you looking to get involved in other things?
So we
Or
did have we have a painting company as well. So we have ventured off into other entrepreneurial things. Um, and yeah, I'm totally interested in new real estate. So now that I feel like I'm kind of matured and underway here, I have now I'm still keeping focus here, but in my free time, I'm trying to learn how to invest and do other things because at some point when I sell these to the operators, I'll need to know what to do with, the income or the sale of that business. So now I'm definitely interested in learning more things. So I'm will hopefully have a new area of expertise after, a couple of years of investigating new things. So,
so, like, how do you balance? I always get the question, or I'm always fascinated with like, to me, what sticks out in our entrepreneurial life is personal, family, business, like juggling those three
mhm.
things. Like, how do you balance that? Like, how do you mentioned your husband that worked in corporate or doesn't work, or your kids and in the business. Like, how do you balance your personal time, your family time, and like the time allocated to your business? Like, what are a couple things that like reflecting back, you're like, yeah, like here's one thing I do that's just kind of keeps things in perspective.
So what you're talking about, and I'm gonna broaden this out to the people that are managing the other locations. When they first start managing the location, everything that goes wrong or what they perceive to go wrong keeps them up at night, right? And then it's taking away from your family time, and you're taking work home, and you're not learning how to have boundaries, or I mean, when you're an entrepreneur, like initially the boundaries are not there, but when you build in enough infrastructure and you delegate and you give some of your responsibilities down the line, you're doing many things. You're teaching the people that want to maybe do what you're doing that they're capable, because if you don't give them your tasks, you're basically saying I don't trust you to do it. So that's a real big lesson that people who come into the managing partner where they don't want to give away their tasks because they don't want mistakes to be made. Well, honey, mistakes are gonna be made, and it's how you we have a saying, "It's how you handle the mistake, it's not the mistake." So no one gets in trouble or whatever, it's always how you handle it. So in order to have boundaries and balance, you need to learn how to delegate, you need to learn how to be okay with mistakes. There in IXL, we have a lot of perfectionism, so we talk a lot about what that is and how that impacts you and why you have perfectionism, and that it's okay for everything not to be perfect. And when you allow things not to be perfect, then your assistant director and your admin can go, "Okay, I don't have to be perfect either," and everyone can breathe a collective sigh of relief that nothing is ever perfect. And once those things happen, you then free up time for yourself and at home, and it doesn't take up space in your head where you're worrying about all the things. You have other people helping you with those things. But
That's really great advice because I think as an entrepreneur, you mentioned perfectionism, right? Like, hey, if I want it done right, do it myself,
Mhm.
and the ability to delegate. And I think as an entrepreneur, constantly working on delegating things, it's super important. It's really hard though, right? Because you start the company, it's so to speak your own baby, right? But at some point, if you want to grow like Jen to 9 locations and 350 employees, you have to realize and give up a little bit of the control and understand that, it might be 80% to where you would do it if you're looking at 100%. So that's really good advice. So like any books, I love any book that like completely change your perspective, right? I think you've got this mentality of like growth, go for it, put good vibes out in the world, and your operators seem like you would be an amazing. I don't know if I'd call you boss, or I don't know what you refer to as, but like you're a great leader to them. Like what one book was transformational for you that kind of got you into this mindset? I'm sure there are several, but
there's
like, are there any
lots.
standouts?
I think Brene Brown, um, there's Daring to Lead. I think she has a couple new ones. We've actually done like a book club amongst our managing partners and directors where we read this book. It talks a lot about shame, and that really comes into play a lot of times when you think you're making mistakes. And it teaches you how to, a lot of times with leaders will not take responsibility, or they will defer blame, and you lose respect from people that are working for you when you aren't able to step into your own mistakes. And so it teaches a lot about that. I mean, there's so many good leadership books, but that one, I think, it allows you to not to understand and have language around being a good leader and not being perfect. So if I had to pick one, but
That's
gosh,
great.
there's so many.
She's a great author. Yeah, there's so many, but that's a really good one. So, like, outside of all this, like, what do you do for fun, right? As an entrepreneur, real estate tycoon, all these employees, like, what gets you going? Like, what grounds you? What do you do for fun?
I play a lot of volleyball with your wife.
Nice.
Play a
Yeah.
lot of volleyball, and
Nice.
I'm a big mountain biker. I love to travel, and listen to podcasts. Actually, I listen to a lot of
Nice.
podcasts and read books.
Nice.
You got to have your, the latest leadership book. So a lot of books. I probably have read thousands of books. I can't. You can listen to them. You don't have to read them. Whatever you want. I can't stress that enough. Is whatever area of expertise that you want to have more knowledge or more agency in, read a book. Someone else has already done it. You don't have to even reinvent the wheel. Just step into it.
Yeah, what's interesting is I honestly can tell you, I don't think I ever read a textbook in middle school or high school, and I went to, like, community college. But, like, once I knew I was gonna make the leap to become an entrepreneur, that's when I read thousands of books, and that's where I actually think I started learning. And today, like, I constantly listen to audiobooks and read and, like, new information. Data's changing so quickly. Um, so, yeah, no, I appreciate your share. I mean, there's a lot of nuggets in there.
Oh gosh, there's so much
The one
more.
thing I Yeah, there's a ton. But I'm really fascinated with, like, the operating model, of, having that individual get skin in the game. I mean, have you thought you talked about maybe other states, like, has franchising come across your radar? Like, does evolving the business that way, or is it,
So I
just
get
kinda
that question a lot. A lot of people ask me if those are franchises. Um,
Mhm.
I don't want a franchise, and because for me, I want to maintain some level of control. As far as what one center does here impacts another one over here, and also part of my guiding light, if you would call it, is to bring others with me. And someone who can have a franchise already has resources and the wherewithal to do something. So the people that are managing partners, they don't actually put any money in it. They put their time and love and effort into it. And now they're in a position where they wouldn't have been before, where they're um, learning how to run a business, learning how to become an entrepreneur, which they might not ever have had that situation on their own. So I feel like part of what inspires me and part of what keeps me going, doing other locations, because if it were just money, I think I would have been okay, you know, for where I was probably 3 or 4 centers ago. But for me, what keeps motivating me to do this is that the leaders that I work with are so extraordinary that I want to give them an opportunity, that now I have more bandwidth, that it's easier for me to do, and, like, buy the building, and I know what I'm doing, and then put them in a situation where they can be successful.
No, it's awesome. I love the model. I mean, we could probably sit here and talk for a very long time. Um, but where can people find you, right? I know you have LinkedIn, Jennifer Moss on LinkedIn, right? Can people go to the website, ixlkids.com,
Yep. Yep, you'll
right?
find
Fill
my
out a
picture on
contact
there. Yep.
forms. Um, I think if there's other, people listening, like, there might be some opportunities or some real estate things, or, I mean, you offered a lot of great advice today. So I think some people listening might want to reach out and kind of pick your brain. I think it's fascinating. So again, Jennifer Moss, thank you so much for sharing today. Thanks for the audience. Hopefully you learned a thing or two. That's the point of the podcast. You can pick a couple things, which I think, Jen, you shared a lot today. Super excited. No, this has been an episode of Entrepreneur Intel. Jen, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it too.
Thank you. This has been another episode of Entrepreneur Intel. Thank you for joining us. For show notes or other episodes, please visit us at entrepreneurintel.com. Until next time.